on the table.
I'm going to stop you there and let's bring in the view from industry, because our Paul Lachok-Uppano had the opportunity to speak to Alexander Natz. He's the head of the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, and he asked him if it was fair to say that industry sometimes put profit before people. Take a listen.
To be honest, I don't think any pharma company is doing that. Actually, we have an obligation from the regulatory level to have a positive risk-benefit ratio for medicines. So it's really important that that risk-benefit ratio always stays positive. Otherwise, products get withdrawn by the European Medicines Agency, by the European Commission. And I don't think that is really something companies do here in Europe. Let's not forget that any of the prices of the medicines which we bring to European markets are actually negotiated at the national level with payers and other healthcare systems. This is not a price which the company would only set forward, but it's something which is usually negotiated in the EU countries.
There you go, Alexander Natz there. Adrian, a reaction to that?
Yeah, well, I think actually Alexander is right. So the prices of medicines in Europe, with the exception maybe of one or two countries, maybe the UK or something, they are set by the government. So there's a price negotiation. I think what the Commission is trying to do is strengthen the negotiating power of some member states that maybe are less wealthy or that are very, very small and therefore don't have a strong negotiating position. That's part of the intention behind the legislation. That said, I think another piece that's missing in this legislation is once it is adopted, the member states, your colleagues in the government in Bucharest or other places, they're going to have to implement this in practice and find those pricing solutions, for example. And I think that is something that should be organized. So that doesn't mean that the Commission takes over everything from the national governments, but there should be a clear process of how the national governments are going to implement this. So in the end, patients get the medicines they need. That's what everybody, so that was pointing out, you were pointing out, pharmaceutical industry, the governments, the patient associations, everybody agrees that the ultimate aim of medicines is to get them to a sick patient and to help them. And so we need this part of the legislation. How we translate this into national settings, I think, is very, very important.
And the irony now, some patients don't have access to the medicines, even though they could be produced in their home country, or utensils that they need, like an auto-injector that they need to use to inject their adrenaline, even though they're made. I mean, it seems completely ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we can address the price problem by looking at the big part of the price, which is R&D. So it's natural that the companies need to offset the research and development price, which is higher and higher now as we get more complicated into running things. But I think this is where we can help. Because, okay, we're not regulating prices, maybe, or we're regulating them in the way that you described, but we can, and I think we must help as a European Union in the R&D part, because we're also looking at America, we're also looking at China as competitors, and we saw what happened during the pandemic. Who had the best R&D facilities? They were actually the best in the world. So I think we need to invest in that, and the pharma companies need to be our partners in that, so that Europe keeps the competitive advance in this field, and so we get the prices lowered.
Reaction there, Danielle?
Yeah, for sure, completely agree. And I think research and innovation, research and development is somewhere where Europe can play a strong role. When we go into the conversations about pricing, it always gets a little bit more tricky, given the competencies with health and where these conversations tend to happen more at the member state level. But definitely in terms of R&D, R&I, EU can play a strong role.
Now, we're almost out of time on this topic, but I also want to just draw your attention to the amount of money spent on lobbying by the pharma industry as well in this town. We were looking at some figures by Corporate Europe Observatory, and they said that the pharma sector is spending about 36 million euros trying to put influence, and there's about 290 pharma lobbyists based in Brussels. What would your reaction be to that? Is that fair?
Well, I wish that our association had that kind of budget so that I could hire many more staff. Look, I don't know if those figures are correct. Of course, this is a big industry and there are a lot of big companies that have a lot at stake. So they're going to invest in their representation towards the EU. So I don't know if those figures are correct. What I do believe is that I think the pharmaceutical industry, I hope the pharmaceutical industry is engaging in these processes with an ethical perspective. And the ethical perspective is we have to put public health first. And I do believe even my competitors on the other side of the industry are looking at that, even if we don't agree on a lot of policies.
And you as an MEP, have you been lobbied on this file?
Well, listen, I'm definitely not a big fan of lobbying budgets. I think they can put that money to better use. And in order to lobby me, which means talk to me and to make me hear their arguments, they only need an email. So I'm an email away or a phone call away from anyone who wants to talk to me. So that's why, again, I think we can live without this lobbying budget. Again, if someone wants to talk to us, we are here in Brussels or in Strasbourg. I think most of the MEP's doors are open to anyone. So
just briefly, Danielle, did you see the posters around the city?
Yeah, I think you'd be dead not to recognise them. They were everywhere. And I think as well, there was a delay in January with this file, and a lot of people thought that the influence that the strong lobby had, the pharmaceutical industry, was going to really make massive changes to a leaked version that I think most people saw earlier on. But it was quite welcoming to actually see yesterday that there were some changes, but they perhaps weren't as big or as groundbreaking as we would have thought. So while their lobbying is still there, I think the Commission did, to a certain degree, not completely, but held firm. So
okay, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to you all for your insights. We will come back to it as we follow those negotiations and keep you well informed. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be looking into artificial intelligence and the role that can play in healthcare. See you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.
This convening is taking place during a critical time for the global economy. We're going to hear from a slate of accomplished leaders in business and government. They'll speak to why we need to strengthen our trading ties, implement ambitious green transition plans, and close the skills gap that so many companies are struggling with.
Looking for a dose of escapism? Sign up for the Euronews travel newsletter. Get travel news, experiences, and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox. Sign up on euronews.com/travel.
I'm so scared. Why are you scared?
Italia se muere de sed, la situación es especialmente dramática.
Being here is just chilling. Und die Menschen haben Angst vor diesem Wasser.
Refugees arrive at any moment.
La prossima edizione del notiziario tra meno di 2 minuti su Euronews.
La Commissione europea corre ai ripari dopo le proteste degli agricoltori in 5 Stati membri, salvati i corridoi della solidarietà che garantiscono le esportazioni ucraine. Supera i 500 morti e i 4.000 feriti il bilancio delle violenze in Sudan, l'allarme delle organizzazioni internazionali, centinaia di migliaia di persone sono in fuga. 3 giorni in Ungheria per parlare a tutti. Dopo aver incontrato i vertici di Stato e di governo maggiari, Papa Francesco incontra poveri e rifugiati. Con un'intesa raggiunta con i 5 paesi colpiti dal crollo dei prezzi dei prodotti alimentari dovuto alla sovrabbondanza di merce ucraina, Bruxelles tenta di svincolarsi dal rischio di un pericoloso autogol nella solidarietà a Kiev.
European Commission will propose emergency safeguard measures for 4 most sensitive agricultural products, wheat, maize, rapeseed and sunflower seed. We'll put forward safeguard investigations for several other products. There's going to be a financial support package for farmers in a neighboring member states of 100 million euros.
A Ungheria, Polonia, Slovacchia, Bulgaria e Romania, la Commissione europea promette misure di salvaguardia eccezionali. Le importazioni dei prodotti nei paesi in questione potranno essere bloccate in situazioni di crisi, ma mai per impedirne il transito verso gli altri Stati membri o altri paesi extraeuropei. Un incendio di grandi dimensioni è divampato in un deposito carburante a Sebastopoli, la principale città della Crimea, annessa insieme al resto della regione alla Russia nel 2014. Il governatore regionale Mikhail Razvotsayev ha affermato che le fiamme sono state causate dall'attacco di un drone. Nonostante abbia coinvolto una superficie di 1000 metri quadrati, l'incendio non ha causato vittime. Martedì scorso, 2 esplosioni avevano coinvolto una raffineria e i depositi contigui della compagnia russa Rosneft a Bryansk, 150 km a nord dal confine ucraino. Le ostilità tra l'esercito fedele al capo dello Stato de facto Abdel Fattah al-Burhan e le forze di supporto rapido del generale Mohammed Abdan Dagalo in Sudan si fermeranno ufficialmente per altri 3 giorni, ma le violenze continuano nella capitale Khartoum e nella sua città gemella Omdurman. Il Ministero della Salute del paese parla di oltre 500 morti e 4.000 feriti in 2 settimane di scontri, un bilancio che non risparmia neanche il territorio del Darfur, che per anni ha vissuto gli orrori della pulizia etnica. Diversi governi sono all'opera per evacuare i cittadini ancora residenti sul territorio, ma spaventano gli allarmi su un altro esodo. Secondo le organizzazioni internazionali sono centinaia di migliaia gli sfollati che stanno lasciando il paese. In visita per la seconda volta in 2 anni nel paese, Papa Francesco dice di essere arrivato in Ungheria come pellegrino e amico in un territorio ricco di storia e di cultura. Il pontefice esorta le autorità pubbliche a una politica che non infiammi gli animi e che si apra all'accoglienza.
Questo ci allena all'accoglienza, un'accoglienza che è profezia. cioè a trasmettere la consolazione del Signore nelle situazioni di dolore e di povertà del mondo, stando vicini ai cristiani perseguitati, ai migranti che cercano ospitalità, alle persone di altre etnie, a chiunque si trovi nel bisogno.
A pastori e laici il pontefice chiede di evitare di chiudersi in oasi religiose comode e tranquille. Sabato mattina l'incontro con poveri e rifugiati chiuderà la giornata alla riunione con la comunità gesuita. Il presidente brasiliano Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva ha proclamato la creazione di 6 nuove aree protette in cui promuovere e garantire l'uso sostenibile delle risorse naturali nei territori indigeni. Lula era stato premiato alle elezioni presidenziali del 30 ottobre per le sue promesse di sospendere lo sfruttamento delle risorse intensificato durante il mandato del suo predecessore Jair Bolsonaro. Negli oltre 600.000 ettari individuati, le attività minerarie sono vietate, mentre l'agricoltura e il disboscamento ai fini commerciali avranno bisogno di richieste specifiche.
Segui l'incoronazione di Re Carlo III e della regina consorte Camilla, in diretta sabato 6 maggio su Euronews e euronews.com.
Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show that zooms in on some of the European stories in the spotlight this week. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, this week the European Parliament was set to vote on the EU Commission strategy on artificial intelligence, but then decided to postpone that vote. To find out more about what exactly is in this proposal, our Paul Lachok-Uppano checked in with the EU spokesperson, Johannes Bark, to get the gist of their plans for AI.
So we want to be excellent in AI because we have excellent researchers, but we want people to trust AI because many people have concerns. And, you know, if there are concerns, then people will not use the technology. That's why we focus on, let's say, cases that we need to focus on high-risk cases. So all the time when there is, let's say, fundamental freedoms, you know, an issue for fundamental freedoms or for security, for safety, then this is a high-risk case. So a self-driving car can be a high-risk case, or the use of AI, for example, for police, for law enforcement, for employment, you know. So the idea is we need to find a balance between regulated cases where it's important and allow innovation to thrive for the majority of AI applications.
Johannes Bark there on that constant phrase we keep hearing about finding the balance. Let's hear first from our MEP around the table. Why was that vote delayed? Can lawmakers just not keep up with the speed of AI?
I think that's exactly it, and I think we simply need to keep up. I think it's about speed. It's not the first time when we are last at the party, and you know it's not a good thing to be the last one at the party. Then we're talking serious now. The Americans are first. You don't hear about the European bot. Everything is, so their American famous ChatGPT is American, made in America. Now the Chinese have launched their own. I don't hear anything about the European version. We're constantly thinking about legislation. Yes, legislation is good, and of course we need to keep control of it. But the industry is much faster than it seems the bureaucracy is. And we need to learn from this. Come on, people, okay, let's let the ChatGPT of Europe, let it come out.
Any tips then for lawmakers on this area?
Well, I don't know how to regulate the IT sector, but certainly for the users of IT, like our sector, the pharmaceutical sector, we are actually experimenting with the use of AI, for example, for shortage prevention. So, for example, 9 out of 10 medicine shortages in Europe are in a single country, not across Europe. And so we have this data on each box of medicine, so you can basically see where the boxes are going. And we want to use that data to then predict, oh, there's going to be a shortage in Romania, or there's going to be a shortage in France, and then we can divert the stock to where it's needed. But it's true, we actually are confronted with opposition to this from the regulators. There's no patient data, it's just boxes. But we still get opposition to doing this, which I find is absurd because it's really a social need. And it's technology that we are almost certain is going to work.
And can play a fascinating role in our futures, in our healthcare. I mean, what would be your take on all this?
Well, I think, first of all, AI offers amazing potentials, particularly in health. And I think health is one of those sectors where you can really see the potential benefits of it. While there might be some risks, I think the benefits outweigh them. Even in terms of diagnostics as well. And an issue that we're confronted with in healthcare systems across Europe is healthcare workforce shortages. And actually, AI can play a role in even reducing administrative burdens there. So that's also very important. In terms of regulation, I think we're struggling to keep up. And we really need to push ahead and make sure that even though science is moving very, very quickly, that we also move and try and keep up with it.
And we saw Elon Musk, he looked pretty spooked recently, even though he's also investing in AI, but he has warned that development in AI should be halted. And he said in an interview earlier this week that it's more dangerous than mismanaged aircraft design or production maintenance or bad car production. And he said that it actually has the potential of civilization destruction. I mean, with these comments, is he not just creating more fear around AI?
Well, I wouldn't go into the Terminator movie scenario, you know, because this is what it looks like. Of course, it has downsides and those are obvious. But come on, if we want to keep it in a sandbox, let's do that. And let's use it in a sandbox. But let's build the sandbox already. Maybe we should use AI to legislate faster. I don't know, but we need to do something.
Is it true? Are doctors, is this ethical? Are doctors already using ChatGPT to prescribe medicines for their patients or write sick notes for patients' employees? I mean, would you agree with something like this?
That I don't know. I would already like to see electronic prescribing used all over Europe because I don't know if you're a patient, for example, it's much easier when you go to the pharmacy. It's also much easier for the governments who are reimbursing this that they don't get ripped off somehow. So yeah, I'd like to see those incremental steps already move forward. I don't think that artificial intelligence is going to replace the need for human doctors. That I do not believe. It may facilitate their work and improve their productivity, which I think is necessary today where we have a shortage of healthcare practitioners. But I genuinely do not believe that anywhere in the near future, even the medium term, we're going to replace humans. It's going to rather help them in their diagnosis.
So a bit of reassurance there for any doctors that are tuning into this show today. Danielle Brady, what would be perhaps your message to those who are afraid, though, of AI?
I think information and understanding is key when combating fear and lack of trust. And I think we really need to make sure that we are very transparent with citizens, that they understand what is going on. And it can be quite difficult when it's really complex things, but we need to be transparent, try to broker that understanding among citizens as well in trying to combat that fear.
And then meanwhile in the European Parliament, we'll see when that vote takes place.
Yeah, I'm waiting forward to it as you are, because again, we're last on it. And again, there are some challenges, there are some issues, but we need this tool. It's like any other tool. You can use it to do good, you can use it to do bad. We need to regulate this. But okay, come on people, let's do it faster. Because again, the Chinese are ahead of us. They're using it for not that good purposes. They're using it military. And we need to have our own tools. We cannot afford to be, again, third on in this race.
Do you think we're up for that challenge here in Europe, Adrian?
I actually think that Europe has the capability. I think we do need to have a discussion, and probably more the IT experts, I'm certainly not the one, about a framework that's enabling while also dealing with certain risks. I mean, obviously, as pharmaceutical industry, one of the biggest risks we face is cybersecurity, because of cybersecurity attacks on pharmaceutical companies, on healthcare institutions like hospitals and things like this. So that's not part of AI, but it's part of the challenge with information technology. So we have to deal with those kind of risks. But that doesn't mean we stop using information technology, right? Because it's so important for productivity, for improvements in quality, for drug development. We use it for drug development. We can't stop using this, or we go backward 50 years or something.
Okay, going to stop you there. Thank you so much to you all for your insights, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Now is the time for a new impulse. Moving from a stable ground to a tipping point. Now is the time to be ahead. Now is the time for agility, for sustainable acts. Now is your time.
Surfing big waves and trading have a lot of similarities. Both require a lot of preparation. Knowledge, like reading charts to know the exact moment to go for it. You need to trust your equipment. And when the moment comes, you need to trust yourself.
Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show about the week that was. Well, this week marked 10 years since the Rana Plaza tragedy in Bangladesh, when over 1,000 factory workers died in just a few seconds. Now here, in the city centre of Brussels, large balls of clothes were piled up to highlight the destructive impact of fast fashion. And while I was walking outside the European Parliament this week, a similar demonstration caught my eye. Take a look.
We're out here protesting outside the EU Parliament because we want them to take action on living wages for the people who make our clothes. We know that most people who make our clothes earn so little that they are trapped in poverty. Despite working really gruelling hours, they cannot afford to send their children to school, live in decent housing, access healthcare. And so we're saying that enough is enough, and it's time for the EU to bring in some really vital legislation on living wages for garment workers worldwide.
Kira Barry there from Fashion Revolution telling me the other day that it was Fair Fashion Day to raise awareness really among MEPs about the working conditions of workers making the majority of our clothes. Reaction there, Danielle?
I completely agree. The conditions in a lot of these places where clothes are being made are terrible, and workers are subjected to below standard working conditions, and something needs to be done to address this. I think fast fashion is a massive problem, not only in terms of poverty and conditions that workers face, but also in terms when we look at our planet and sustainability as well. So it's definitely a sector that I think requires attention, and I think that can be done at the EU level.
Can it be done? Do you think that the European Parliament and the EU member states have enough power over the fashion industry?
Well, definitely we can do it, and I will tell you what's our solution. But first, a few figures. 93 billion cubic meters of water. This is the way the fashion industry consumes today, and it produces 20% of the wastewater in the whole of the world. So this is the environmental impact of this industry. And the solution, my colleague Valérie Ayer proposed legislation for a tax that could induce producers to produce in an environmental and social fair way.
And do you think that people think about those figures when they go shopping?
I don't know if people think about it when they go shopping. I think it's increasingly today consumers are what you call empowered, so they look at these different social or environmental aspects. So I think that's more and more the case. I also think companies are subject to stricter environmental, social